Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. First up, a small request. If you're liking our initiatives, if you believe we provide good, quality and timely content to you, please subscribe to our channel and recommend this platform to your friends who may also get benefited. How can I know that our content is being appreciated and you would want us to continue? If this video is liked by, let's say, 10,000 aspirants, I would consider this as an appreciation on your part. So first, like the video and let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a news item on page number 12 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu, relevant for GS paper 2. The year was 1967 and the law was enacted called Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. But what was the objective of this particular piece of legislation? The objective was that we should use this law to punish those individuals who commit unlawful activities or who fund these unlawful activities or those who support these unlawful activities as well as terrorist acts. So basically the intention of the government was that we should have a strong anti-terror legislation in this country. And whoever commissions, funds or supports unlawful activities and terrorist acts in this country, we should punish those organizations. After that, we had two other important anti-terror legislations in this country. One was TADA, Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Act, and the other was POTA, Prevention of Terrorist Act, which was passed in the early 2000s. But both these anti-terror legislations have now been repealed. So as of now, we have one major anti-terror legislation in this country, and that is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Now this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, it authorized the government. What the government can do? Government can either ban these unlawful organizations, or what the government can do? Government can ban these terrorist organizations, or what the government can do? Government can also penalize membership of such unlawful and terrorist organizations. Now what is this amendment? Lok Sabha has amended a bill amidst the opposition walkout, and now this bill tries to make this anti-terror legislation even more stringent. So as of now, if you are a member of a terrorist organization or if you are a member of an unlawful organization, you could have been only penalized. Now what this bill, the amended bill talks about, it talks about that we can even designate individuals as terrorists. Primarily, we could have designated organizations as terrorist organizations or unlawful organizations, but an individual member of such organizations was only penalized. But if an individual has been penalized, it does not stop him from setting up another terrorist organization. So that is what the objective of the current government is, that if we designate individuals also as terrorists, then what will happen? We can have a strong anti-terror law in this country. So the objective is that we should have a law which can bring an end to the terrorism in this country. And the government has assured the country that we are not going to misuse it. But there are others who say that this law should have been repealed just like TADA and POTA have been repealed. Why? What are the criticisms against UAPA? That is something you need to understand from the examination point of view. So let's look at some of the criticisms about this anti-terror legislation. We have seen last year 5 prominent human rights activists were arrested under UAPA. We have seen Jamaat Islami of Jammu and Kashmir banned under UAPA. Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, JKLF, banned under UAPA. We have also seen activists arrested and penalized under UAPA. So there is one contention amongst the opposition and the human rights activists that this UAPA law has been overused, abused, misused in this country. How? Let's look at some of the criticisms. Number one, when we say that UAPA authorizes the government that you can ban an unlawful organization. The first problem is with the definition. How can we define what is an unlawful organization? There may be organizations working amongst the tribals in this country, amongst the Adivasis in this country, amongst the poorer sections of the society, and they may also be termed as unlawful organizations and will be banned under UAPA. Because we have seen instances where there were a certain group of individuals who were working against the construction of dams in this country. And even these organizations were declared as unlawful organizations and banned. We have seen human rights organizations, non-governmental organizations working amongst the poorer sections of our society. They have also been banned and termed as unlawful organizations. So the first problem with this act, with this law, is at the definition level. You can't simply define what is an unlawful organization. Anybody voicing against the dictatorial tendencies of the government can also be termed as an unlawful organization and as such can be banned under this law. That's one problem. Second, this UAPA Act, as I've told you before, it also penalizes the membership of these unlawful organizations and terrorist organizations. That means if the government is in a position to prove, or if the prosecution is in a position to prove before the court of law that you are a member of these unlawful organizations or these terrorist organizations, you can also be penalized. But what defines the membership of these organizations? Let's say, for example, I'm a researcher. When I'm conducting a research on, let's say, the separatists in Jammu and Kashmir or the Maoists in the Naxal affected areas in this country, I may also need the possession of some books or literature of these organizations. Because without the literature, without their books, I may not be in a position to understand what their ideology is. Because Maoists, for example, they want the overthrow of the state. They want the state to wither away. They want the rule of the people to be imposed in this country and not the rule of the corporates in this country. So if I'm conducting research on Maoists or Naxalites, I need to first read their literature. I need to first read what their ideology is all about. But the law states, if I am in possession of books or literature about these unlawful organizations, about these terrorist organizations, that also means that I'm a member of these organizations. And if I'm the member of these organizations, I will be penalized under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Similarly, I want to conduct more research about Maoists or the separatists, and I'm attending their meetings so that I can get to know what their leaders talk about or what is their ideology or how they communicate to their masses. But if I'm attending meetings of these unlawful organizations or these terrorist organizations under UAPA, it would amount to me being the member of such organizations and I will be penalized. That is how G.N. Sai Baba, the professor of a university, and others have been arrested, because it is alleged that since they contained literature, they possessed literature and books about these unlawful organizations, sometimes attended the meetings of these unlawful organizations as well. That is why they are the members of such organizations and therefore should be penalized. And there is another problem with this law, and that deals with Section 43D Clause 5 of this Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Now we know that under criminal justice system in this country, the Supreme Court way back in 1970 said jail is only an exception. Bail is a norm. That means as much as possible release individuals on bail. If I'm an accused in a particular case, but I cannot threaten the witnesses, I'm not in a position to run away from this country, I'm not in a position to tamper with the evidence or to threaten the witnesses, I should not be kept in the jail, but I should be released on bail, because jail is an exception, bail is the norm. If this individual can threaten the witnesses, can tamper with the evidence, can run away from this country, you should put these individuals in jail, but others should be released on bail. Because the golden rule of criminal justice system in this country is you are innocent until proven otherwise. You are innocent until proven guilty. But according to this section under UAPA, if the police is in a position to present before the court a case diary or a charge sheet. And through this case diary or a charge sheet, prima facie, at the face of it, it is assumed that yes, I am guilty. Then what the court can do? Court can refuse me a bail. What am I trying to say? Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. This bill has been amended by the Lok Sabha amidst the opposition walkout. Now, if this bill is passed by Rajya Sabha as well, ultimately what will happen? The government will be authorized that you can even designate individuals as terrorists. Clear? The government sources say that such a provision exists even in Pakistan, even in United States, even at the United Nations. So we should also change our law so that we can designate individuals as also terrorists. So now an individual can be designated as a terrorist, unlawful organizations can be banned, terrorist organizations can be banned, members of such organizations can also be banned and penalized. But the real question is about the law itself. There are people who are advocating that just like TADA and POTA, UAPA should also be repealed. Why? One problem with this law is that the definition of unlawful organizations is very vague, that we have discussed. Second contentious issue is how do we define who are the members of these unlawful organizations and terrorist organizations? That is something that we have discussed. Third is related to bail provision under Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. There is a golden rule in criminal justice system in India that as much as possible, if there is a trial which is pending, release individuals on bail. But if these individuals are threat to society, they have the potential to tamper with the evidence, they have the potential to run away from this country, keep such individuals inside jail, don't grant them bail. But now there is another provision in UAPA which says that if the police presents a case diary or a charge sheet before the judiciary, and through this case diary or charge sheet, prima facie, it is made out that there is a strong case against an accused, then bail shall be denied. But do you know what the problem is? Case diary is the version of the police, and as such is the version of the state. Charge sheet also is the version of the police, and as such is the version of the state. Where is the version of an accused? That means you are denying this individual a bail just because he is accused by the state. And the law states that 180 days are granted to the police. Within these 180 days, charge sheet is to be filed by the police. And this period can also be extended at the court orders. So basically for 6 months, you can detain an individual even on flimsy grounds if this individual is viewed by the state as a member of an unlawful organization or a terrorist organization. That is why human rights organizations, activists are saying that this is a law which tries to curb meaningful dissent in democracy. And in democracy, dissent is always important. That's what Voltaire said. I disagree with what you say, but I will defend till death your right to say it. So in a democracy, people should have the right to disagree with the government. People should have the right to disagree with political parties. And this disagreement is health. Dissent is health of a democracy. And this UAPA law is enacted to stifle independent thinking, to stifle dissent in this country. That is why this law should be repealed. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another newspaper article on the same page number 12. POCSO bill has been cleared. This bill has been cleared by the Rajya Sabha. Now it will go to Lok Sabha, and in all likelihood Lok Sabha will pass this bill, and then it will be sent to the president for his assent, for his signature, and then this bill will become a law. This law was passed for the first time in the year 2012. Then it was amended in 2016 as well. Now further amendments have been made in 2019. Let's look at what these amendments are and what is it that you need to understand from this newspaper article for the civil services examination. First and foremost, you need to understand that this POCSO is a gender neutral law. What does that mean? That means this law punishes those offenders who are guilty of committing sexual violence against children. And who are these children? Anybody less than the age of 18. So that means regardless of the gender of the children, anybody less than the age of 18, if sexual offenses have been committed against them, punishments will be given. These offenders will be booked under POCSO. And what is POCSO? Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. Now, what are these changes? Number one, if you look at, there are offenses which are referred to as penetrative sexual assault, and there are some offenses which are referred to as aggravated sexual assault. Let's look at the difference. Initially, if an offender was guilty of penetrative sexual assault, the punishment to this individual was 7 years. Now, because of the changes in this law, if this law is given approval by the president, what will happen? If somebody is guilty of penetrative sexual assault, now the punishment would be 10 years. That means the punishment has been enhanced. One important thing, if the offender has committed sexual assault, penetrative sexual assault against a child who is less than 16 years of age, now the punishment will be 20 years or life imprisonment along with the fine. That means what is the major difference between the POCSO Act of 2012 when it was amended in 2016 and the current changes? The punishment have been enhanced. So initially it was 7 years, now it is 10 years. And somebody committing penetrative sexual assault against a child less than the age of 16, 20 years or life imprisonment. But what is this aggravated sexual assault? When does a sexual assault become aggravated? If this sexual assault is committed by a police officer, it becomes aggravated. If the sexual assault is committed by the members of the armed forces, it becomes aggravated. If this sexual assault is committed by a public servant, if this sexual assault is committed by the relative of the child, it becomes aggravated. And now 2 more aggravated sexual assault have been added to this bill. And what are these? If this sexual assault results in the death of the child, and if this aggravated sexual assault, penetrative sexual assault is conducted or carried out during a natural calamity. And in such cases, the punishment has been enhanced. Even death penalty can be imposed upon the convicts. So basically, what we are trying to understand here is that there is one important piece of legislation which tries to protect our children. And who are these children? Below the age of 18 from sexual assault, from sexual offenses. And for that, the punishments have now been enhanced. There is a difference between penetrative sexual assault and aggravated sexual assault. And aggravated sexual assault, now the punishment has been enhanced. Even death sentence can be prescribed for those who are committing these aggravated penetrative sexual assaults. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news article on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Opposition wants select panel scrutiny of key bills or key legislations. If you read newspapers or you've watched television debates, there was a furore when MP from Bhopal, Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur, she said that I have not been elected to clean the toilets or clean your drains. In one way, she was absolutely right. What is the job of a legislator? The job of a legislator is to enact laws. For Bijli, Sadak, Pani, drainage, we have local governments, Panchayati Raj institutions, municipalities, for example. So you need to understand the principal role played by a legislator, whether we are talking about MLA or we are talking about member of the parliament of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. The principal objective of such legislators is to enact laws, make laws for this country. But what we have seen here is that there are close to 790 MPs in Parliament, 545 in Lok Sabha, 245 in Rajya Sabha. 790 MPs, is it remotely possible for all these MPs to come together, dissect, scrutinize, debate every single bill pending in the Parliament? It is remotely not possible because the burden on the legislators would be huge. The quality of debate would reduce, and ultimately the law which is passed by these members would be full of loopholes. So basically what I'm trying to say is that number one, Parliament is not always in session. We have a budget session, then we have a monsoon session, then we have a winter session. So Parliament is not always in session. And at the same time, there is an increased need of more and more legislations, more and more laws in this country. But it is not remotely possible that all these 790 MPs would come together, dissect, scrutinize, debate every single piece of legislation in this country. This is where the role of parliamentary committees become very, very important. And broadly, we have two such committees. One is Select Committee, the other is Joint Parliamentary Committee. Let's say, for example, there is a Bill A and this bill is pending in Rajya Sabha. These select committees or these committees of the Indian Parliament, they have emerged as mini parliaments. How? Instead of all the parliamentarians coming together and debating, let's say, DNA technology bill or UAPA bill or RTI bill, instead of all these MPs coming together and debating, dissecting and scrutinizing these bills, there is a committee constituted by the Speaker. The select group of individuals, the select group of members of the parliament, they come together, a group is formed, a committee is formed, and this committee is now tasked with scrutinizing this particular bill. That means for DNA technology bill, there will be one committee. For Aadhaar bill, there will be one committee. For RTI bill, there will be another committee. And as such, this mini parliament, this select group of MPs, they will come together and scrutinize this bill with greater clarity and greater in-depth analysis. And that is when, after the report of these committees, what will happen? The laws would be meaningful. The laws would be with less and less loopholes. That means to enact beautiful, strong, effective laws in this country, we need more and more bills being referred to select committees or joint parliamentary committees. But what is the difference between the two? If a bill is pending in Rajya Sabha, members of the select committee would only be from Rajya Sabha. If the bill is pending in Lok Sabha, the members of the select committee would only be from Lok Sabha. But in joint parliamentary committee, members would be both from Lok Sabha as well as Rajya Sabha. But how are these members elected or appointed? They are appointed by the Speaker, but based on proportional representation system. And what is this proportional representation system? Let's say, for example, for this particular bill, we need to constitute a select committee. In this case, what will happen? A select committee will be constituted. Let's assume the number of members of the select committee is 31. All these members will have to be elected based on proportional representation system, which means if BJP has 52% of the MPs in Lok Sabha, 52% of these 31 would be members of the BJP. 10% of the members of this committee would be from party B, would be from party C, so on and so forth. That means in these committees of the Indian Parliament, all parties get representation due to their proportion. In proportion to their representation, they would get representation in these select committees and joint parliamentary committees. But the beautiful thing about these parliamentary committees is this. Number one, no whip is issued. You would know that there is a controversy, or there was a controversy till recently about the whips to be issued for the Congress MLAs by the Congress party in Karnataka. And if any political person, if any member of the parliament violate these whips, they can be disqualified under anti-defection law as well. But if I am from the Congress party and I'm part of a select committee, and this select committee is looking into the RTI amendment, the amendments to the RTI bill. When I'm participating in the debates and the discussions inside the select committee, no whip can be issued against me. That means here, non-partisan outlook takes a priority. That means even if you are members from BJP, Congress, BJD, Samajwadi Party, Mayawati's party, even if you are members of various political parties, but when you are debating inside these select committee meetings, you are non-partisan because whip cannot be issued. On top of that, these parliamentary committees always work. How? We have seen repeated disruptions in parliament. Not just this time, but previously as well. There was a time when a member of the parliament from Andhra Pradesh, the undivided Andhra Pradesh, he entered into Lok Sabha with a pepper spray gun and sprayed pepper on the members of the parliament. He came to be known as the pepper spray MP. We have seen tables are thrown at each other, the mics, other equipments are thrown at each other. So there is chaos, pandemonium inside the parliament. On one hand, parliament is not functioning, but on the other hand, these parliamentary committees, they work. There have been instances, newspaper reports, where members belonging to the opposition, they agree with the government. Where the government members, they agree with the opposition. So basically, if we look at the meetings of these parliamentary committees, they work in a non-partisan manner and they work for the national interest. They work for the development and the prosperity of this country. That is why more and more bills should be referred to these select committees. More and more bills should be referred to these parliamentary committees so that there is more debate, so that there is better scrutiny of these bills, so that a better law is made at the end of the day. Unfortunately, what is happening, in the 14th Lok Sabha, the number of bills which were referred to the parliamentary committees, the percentage was 60. In the 15th Lok Sabha, the number of the bills referred to these committees, the percentage was 71. But if you look at 16th Lok Sabha, the percentage was only 25%. That means the bills are getting passed by the parliament without any debate, without any discussion, without any scrutiny. And ultimately what we are doing, we are bypassing parliament. We are making parliament redundant. Laws should be passed in this country, but not with the brute majority of the government, but through consensus, through debate, through discussion, through scrutiny. And that is why opposition, they've come together and they want more and more bills should be referred to these parliamentary committees, select committees, joint parliamentary committees, so that at the end of the day, the law is passed, but with clarity, with purpose, and with thought. Which reminds me of Edmund Burke, a philosopher, writer, orator, politician as well. And this is a quote that you can use in your answer. And I will be providing you a mains-based question at the end of this discussion. And this is a quote that you can use there. Parliament is not a congress of ambassadors from different and hostile interests, which interest each must maintain as an agent and as an advocate against other agents and other advocates. But Parliament is a deliberative assembly of one nation with one interest, that of the whole, where not local purposes, not local prejudices ought to guide, but the general good resulting from the general reason of the whole. So you may be a member from Bhopal or you may be a member from South Bengaluru, but when you are inside the parliament, you are the member of the parliament representing the nation. So you may not be a member of the Bristol, but he is a member of the parliament. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of the Hindu. Ajay Bhalla to be the new Home Secretary. Now such a question can never be asked by the UPSC. Who is the Home Secretary of India? No. But the process is important. How Home Secretary is appointed. For that, we have 8 cabinet committees of the Union Executive or the Union Cabinet. 8 cabinet committees are there. Initially, the number was 6. Now 2 more have been added. So we have 8 cabinet committees. One such cabinet committee is Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. And all the important appointments are cleared by this Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. It is headed by the Prime Minister, and the other member of this panel is the Minister of Home Affairs. So all the appointments at the level of Joint Secretary and above, they are to be approved by the Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. And this is where this newspaper article becomes important. So if tomorrow there is a question on what is the role of Appointments Committee of the Cabinet, or Home Secretary is appointed by or on the basis of the recommendation of which of the following committee, so for that you need to understand the role of Appointments Committee of the Cabinet. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news. On page number 8, Andhra Pradesh passes bill on 75% quota for local youth. I know there would be a question on your mind, is this constitutional? Because there can be no discrimination on the grounds of residence, for example. But this is something which is constitutional, and I'll tell you how. We have Article 16 of the Constitution of India, which talks about equality of opportunity in public employment. And what is public employment? Government jobs. So the state cannot discriminate when it provides public employment. But here we are talking about private employment. We are not talking about state employment or public employment. That's difference number one. Second, Article 16 says there shall be equality of opportunity in public employment, and the state shall not discriminate only on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth, descent, as well as residence. When residence cannot be a ground of discrimination under Article 16, how can 75% for quota for local youth be declared constitutional? Because the Andhra Pradesh government is not trying to discriminate on the grounds of residence, but it is trying to discriminate on the grounds of domicile. And who is a domicile of Karnataka, for example? Because in 2014, a similar type of proposal was there from the Siddaramaiah government as well. Siddaramaiah was the chief minister of Karnataka at that point in time. The state can discriminate on the grounds of domicile. And what is domicile? Residence plus intention to stay. And what is this intention to stay? Let's say, for example, there is somebody who is born in Delhi. Then he migrated to Karnataka. He studied his 10th from Karnataka, 12th from Karnataka, engineering as well as from Karnataka, and is also doing job in Karnataka. That means now Karnataka is his domicile because he resides in Karnataka and it is his intention to stay in Karnataka permanently. And as per the Karnataka domicile rules, if anybody stays in Karnataka for 15 years, he or she would be eligible as the domicile certificate for the domicile certificate, and as such for domiciles there can be reservation. And Supreme Court has said in multiple judicial verdicts that not more than 50% jobs should be reserved for domiciles. So domicile can be a basis for reservation, can be a basis for discrimination, but not only residence. And what is the difference between domicile and residence? Domicile is residence plus intention to stay. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let us look at some of the editorials and columns from today's newspaper. First up, having the last word on population control. On July 11, Mr. Jagdish Ratanani writes that on World Population Day, a union minister in his tweet said that there is population explosion in this country. That is why we need to control population. Baba Ramdev said, if there is a family which has more than 2 children, then third child, fourth child, fifth child should be deprived of right to vote, should be deprived to contest elections, for example. This led to a hilarious statement by Hyderabad MP Asaduddin Uwaisi, who remarked that if such a bill or such a proposal becomes a law, then Prime Minister of this country would be ineligible to hold the office because he's the third child of his parents. But be that as it may, this column particularly talks about that we should not be looking at population in terms of population control, but we should be looking at population from the prism of choices and services rather than control. How? Let's have an understanding on this column. Is there population explosion in this country? No. Why? Because if you look at the Economic Survey 2018-2019, the Economic Survey says that India is all set to witness a sharp slowdown in population. That means we are trying to create a hysteria that there is population explosion in this country. But on ground, if we look at, Economic Survey says that there is going to be a sharp slowdown in our population, and by 2030, the states will be transitioning into aging societies. That's number one. Number two, if you look at Japan, Japan is considered to be an aging society. And if you look at India, we are talking about a concept called demographic dividend. That means the majority of our population is below the age of 25, more than 50% of our population below the age of 35. These are the people who are going to be tomorrow's job seekers as well as job enablers, job creators as well. So for the first time, we have population which is on our positive side. Boston Consulting Group came out with a study of workforce availability in the world. It came out with a grim forecast saying that there would be an acute shortage of working people across the world, including China. But for the first time, India would be at an advantage. So for the first time, we could convert our numbers to our advantage. But there is a catch here. The men we produce, the women we produce must be good at their work because the world requires professionals, not hackers. We would require plumbers, we would require electricians, we would require AI professionals, artificial intelligence professionals as well. So that is why we have to impart skill development training to our youth so that tomorrow they can be job seekers, enablers, creators as well. But on the other hand, when we are talking about reaping the benefits of demographic dividend, we should not be talking about population control according to the author. But even then, how can we ensure that the population explosion will not take place? For that, the analysis says that with the social development, with the educational development, with the economic development of our society, the population is bound to come down. People are looking at one child norm. People are looking at we don't need more than two children because we can't sustain them. We can't sustain such a large family in times of high inflation and global uncertainty. So those who are socially, educationally and economically advanced, they make a conscious decision of keeping their family size minimum. But where do we see more family members? In lower strata of the society, and for multiple reasons. So why is it that amongst the lower strata of our society, the family size is large as compared to the urban India or as compared to those who are socially, educationally and economically advanced? It is because of, number one, infant mortality rate. There's a poor family, they're planning kids and a child is born. Then another child is born. Another child is born. Why? Because they are not sure how many children will survive. So it is because of this reason that there is a larger family size when it comes to those who are poor. Second reason again is the preference for male child. That is another cause of increased family size. Third is the argument given by Marxists, for example, that if we have more members in our family, that means more hands would be available so that these more hands can help the family in agriculture, in other economic activities. That means for economic reasons, so that more children, more economy, more benefit to the family. For this reason, family size is also large. Fourth, it also depends on lack of contraceptives. For example, in rural areas or in Bharat as we call, there is still some skepticism towards these contraceptives. And if a member of the family is so-called caught with contraceptives, his image in the family is lowered. And that is why they don't use contraceptives. And that is how they are not in a position to take the benefits of these contraceptive measures. And reasons can be different as well. For example, in 1960s in United States of America, there was a power cut for 8 hours. And 9 months later, there was a huge jump in childbirths. So a power cut for 8 hours can be linked to population growth in a particular country. And that happens in India as well. The poor in this country may not have sufficient means of entertainment in this country, and that is how the only way to entertain themselves, according to various reports, is by having sexual relationship with their partner without the use of contraceptives, and that is how the population grows. So this column basically focuses upon that we should not be looking at population from the prism of population control, but we should be looking at how we can offer choices and services to the people. Services such as insurance, services such as better maternal care, services such as better prenatal care, services such as nutrition for the pregnant mother, for the lactating mother, so that if a healthy child is born, if a child is given nutritional food for up to a point, then we can convert these healthy children into productive workforce environment in this country. Population control is something that Sanjay Gandhi prescribed during the time of the emergency, when men were forcibly taken to the hospitals and then Nasbandi was carried out. And let me tell you one thing. We have a concept called TFR, total fertility rate. What is this TFR? TFR is the average number of children that will be born to a woman during her lifetime. That is total fertility rate. And if this TFR is 2.1, that is what we call the replacement level. And the replacement level below this line, population begins to decline. There is a beautiful point mentioned in this article. It says that there are 23 states and union territories in this country, including all the states in the South India, where fertility below the replacement level of 2.1 has already taken place. So that means the population is bound to come down. So we should not be looking at population explosion. That is why this phrase population control should not be used. There should be a clear understanding that offering choices and services rather than outright state control works best. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. There is another important editorial Undermining RTI. Now if we look at RTI, RTI is one of the principal tool of transparency in this country. What is transparency? Whatever is inside, if it is visible outside, that means we are talking about a transparent system. But so far as government is concerned, how can we define transparency? The government takes lots of decisions, and these decisions are taken on the basis of some facts, on the basis of some data, on the basis of some information. Clear? If this is known to us, then we can understand whether these decisions taken by the government are right or wrong. Access to this fact or data or information is very crucial to understand transparent working of the government. And that is how a beautiful law was enacted by the Parliament in the year 2005 called Right to Information Act. Under this RTI, every public authority, every government body has to designate PIOs, public information officers. And if you need any information, all you have to do, file an RTI application, and this PIO will furnish you these facts, data and information. Yes, there are some exceptions. For example, information related to national security, obviously you can't ask. Information related to deeply personal things that you have, that is something that you can't ask. Information that will serve no public purpose, that is something that you cannot seek using an RTI application. But it is because of this RTI that massive scams have been unearthed in this country. For example, coal scam, Commonwealth Games scam, Adarsh Housing Society scam. All these important scams have been unearthed using RTI. And now there is an allegation that this RTI, this beautiful piece of legislation, is being undermined by the government by bringing in amendments. What are these amendments? Let's have a look at that. Let's say, for example, this is a State Information Commission, and at the center we have a Central Information Commission. That means all states will have State Information Commissions. Center will have its own Central Information Commission. And the Central Information Commission would have Chief Information Commissioner and Information Commissioners. The law states that these members should be given security of tenure. That means they will retire at the age of 65. Their salary, emoluments, allowances will be same as that of the members of the Election Commission of India, and their salary is equal to the judges of the Supreme Court. This was something which is fixed, which is according to the law. Now what the government is trying to do, the government is trying to bring in a law so that what is the tenure of Central Information Commissioner or Chief Information Commissioner and the Information Commissioners will be determined by the government. That means there will be no security of tenure. The tenure shall be determined by the government. and the salary allowances emoluments will also be determined by the government. What is the rationale behind this? The government says, look, Central Information Commission is a statutory body provided by the Act of the Parliament under RTI Act of 2005. But Election Commission of India is a constitutional body. To rationalize various authorities in this country, we can't equate a statutory body with Election Commission of India, with a constitutional body. That is why these changes have been prescribed. That is why these changes have been proposed. But the critics argue that the reasons are different. How can we ensure that an authority A is working without any outside influence, outside pressure or political pressure? Two things are required: financial independence and security of tenure. This security of tenure, that a chief information commissioner would have a tenure till he attains the age of 65 years, that is being snatched. This important feature of independence, that your salary will be same as that of the election commissioners or the chief election commissioner, this is also being snatched. And the critics argue that the government is doing this because if there is a chief information commissioner who will go against the government of the day and who will effectively implement the RTI Act, the government can curb his tenure, can curtail his tenure, can curb his salary as well. And that is how these members of the Central Information Commission would toe the line of the government. There was no need to bring in these amendments. When there was no need to bring in these amendments, and now you're bringing these amendments, it is bound to be viewed with suspicion. That means there is no fundamental need to make all these changes. But if you want to make these changes, that means there is something hideous involved into this. And that is why there is a demand from political parties, opposition, that this RTI amendment bill should be referred to the select committee of the parliament, and then it should be deliberated, discussed, dissected and scrutinized. And then the report of the committee should be upheld by the government. But one important point which I missed when we discussed the role of the select committees of the parliament is that their report is not binding on the parliament. Parliament may accept that report, parliament may reject that report, but ultimately that report provides a solid piece of data, information and logic for the parliament to act upon. That is what you need to understand regarding this newspaper editorial. Now let's look at another column on page number 10, Shifting Strategic Concerns, written by Zorawar Daulat Singh, a fellow at the Center for Policy and Research. We know the background of this. India and Pakistan separated at birth, and there is a dispute between the two countries called the Dispute of Kashmir. Although the government of India says it is not a dispute, it is an outstanding issue between India and Pakistan. And what is the difference between a dispute and an outstanding issue between India and Pakistan? The government of India says that the only outstanding issue on the state of Jammu and Kashmir is that the part of Jammu and Kashmir occupied by Pakistan should also be returned to India. Clear? And it has been a consistent policy of the government of India that there should be no interference in India's internal matter, which is Kashmir. In 1948, Pandit Nehru, the then Prime Minister of India, took this matter to United Nations and Kashmir issue was internationalized. After that, we saw the 1971 war where Pakistan was defeated. Pakistan got split into two and Bangladesh emerged as an independent country. And then at the end of that war, Shimla Agreement was signed. And according to Shimla Agreement, Jammu and Kashmir is not a dispute. It is an outstanding issue between India and Pakistan, which is to be resolved bilaterally. That means there should be no international intervention. Same was reiterated in 1999 when Lahore Declaration was signed between India and Pakistan. The then Indian Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee said that we are going to resolve Jammu and Kashmir, but bilaterally there should be no international mediation or arbitration. US President Donald Trump, while interacting with the media when Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan was on a visit to United States, he remarked that Prime Minister Modi wanted mediation from United States on Kashmir. So basically, he alleged that Prime Minister Modi spoke with President Trump and asked President Trump if he could mediate between India and Pakistan on this Kashmir issue or Kashmir dispute. But India has rejected this. India has said that no such offer was made, no such discussion took place. But be that as it may, what this column basically talks about, it's a very beautiful column, very interesting column, but it is more important for those who have political science and international relations as their optional, not much relevant for your GS. But still I'm going to touch upon important areas here. This column says that India thinks that we have a stronger position as compared to Pakistan. Pakistan also thinks the same. How? India thinks that we have a stronger position because of its economy, because of the mandate that Prime Minister Modi got in 2014 as well as in 2019. And Pakistan thinks that we have an upper hand because of its strategic location. And this strategic location is of much, much important significance. If you look at immediately after India got independence, India had a foreign policy of non-alignment. That means at that point in time, there were two world powers, two superpowers of the world, United States and USSR. India decided not to align with any of these powers and instead charted out an independent foreign policy based on the principles of non-alignment. Pakistan, on the other hand, militarily aligned with the United States of America. And it is to be said that at the time of the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971, the USS 7th Fleet of US Navy came closer to Bay of Bengal and tried to aid and help the Pakistan. It was the dramatic, beautiful intervention by the Russians at that time that thwarted and that controlled the United States' involvement in the Indo-Pakistan War. But Pakistan has been an important player so far as United States scheme of things is concerned. When 9/11 attack took place, United States launched war on terror and Pakistan was an important ally in that war on terror. And Pakistan is required by two important global superpowers today, United States as well as China. China purely because of economics. So if you look at Belt and Road Initiative, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, for these massive investments, Pakistan is needed. A helpful, friendly Pakistan is needed for China. And China and Pakistan, they are all weather friends. And it is also alleged that China supports Pakistan primarily to antagonize India or to keep India at bay. United States also require the help of Pakistan because of Afghanistan. United States is exiting from Afghanistan, and for peace in the region, for stability in Afghanistan, Pakistan is very, very important ally for United States. And it is through Pakistan's help that Taliban has come on board. There are talks between Taliban and United States, whether at Qatar or any other location, and Pakistan has been instrumental in bringing Taliban on the negotiating table so that talks can be conducted and peace can be restored to the region. That is why Pakistan is very important for United States. There is one important thing. In India, we say India or Indian state has an army. In Pakistan, we say Pakistani army has a state of Pakistan. Clear? And Pakistani establishment, military establishment is based in Rawalpindi, the headquarters of the Pakistan army. According to this column, both United States and China, they would want civilian government in place in Pakistan. Because for much of its history, Pakistan has been governed and administered and ruled by military dictators. Be it Ayub Khan, Yahya Khan, Ziaul Haq, Pervez Musharraf. For much of its history, Pakistan has been ruled and administered and governed by the military dictators, but not in India. But this column talks about that civilian government is required in Pakistan, a fruitful, strong civilian government, but at the same time, a strong Rawalpindi. And at the same time, an elite class in Pakistan which has a westward thinking or a westward point of view. English-speaking elites so that they can call for better ties with European countries and United States of America. And it is this beautiful mix of strong Rawalpindi, a good, responsible, stable political government, civilian government in Pakistan, and a westward looking elite in Pakistan. And for India, this column talks about something very important. This column says that if US mediation is needed, US mediation should be needed where? So that United States can mediate, pressurize Pakistan that you should stop cross-border infiltration into Jammu and Kashmir. You should stop this proxy war that you have launched against India. That means mediation is not required to resolve the Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan. If at all India seeks mediation, it should seek mediation so that US can pressurize Pakistan and stop cross-border infiltration into the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir. That is what this newspaper article is all about. Now let's look at another column on page number 11. There is a policy called Draft National Education Policy. It's only a draft, it has not been finalized yet. This column particularly talks about one aspect of this draft related to medical education. And this article heavily criticizes this draft national education policy on medical education. How? According to this draft, equity is required, justice is required, but where? When you are enrolling doctors and when you are providing access to patients in accessing these medical facilities. In both these matters, in enrollment for doctors and access to medical education and medical equipments, equity and justice is the need of the hour. But this draft national education policy on medical education, the author says is confusing. How is it confusing? Number one, the draft says that fees, whether of government or public medical colleges or private medical colleges, it should be decided by the institution itself. That means this is one thing that this draft talks about. Fees should be decided by the institution itself. But on the other hand, the same draft talks about that the fees should be lowered as well. Both are contradictory because why would private educational institutions, medical colleges lower their fee? That's number one. The draft says that all these medical institutions should be not for profit. But we know one of the biggest generator as well as consumer of black money in this country are these medical educational institutions. For example, if a rich individual has to seek admission for his son or daughter in a medical college, he has to pay 1 crore rupees in a top medical college in India. But this 1 crore rupee partly in cash. There is another problem in the draft. Although this is only a draft, it is not a policy, but those writing mains examination this year, it can be an important question for your examination. But for those who are writing prelims in 2020, just understand what this issue is all about as and when the changes are made, as and when this policy is given a final shape, then we will have an elaborate discussion on this. There is one examination for entrance to medical colleges called NEET. Now there is another examination proposed called National Exit Test. Unless and until all these MBBS students, they pass this National Exit Test, they cannot enroll in a PG course, they cannot practice their profession as well. So this National Exit Test is sought to be made mandatory now. But there is a problem with this National Exit Test. What if, for example, I am an MBBS student, I failed in this National Exit Test. Does that mean my 5 years in a medical college go waste? Or am I eligible for a retest? If I'm eligible for a retest, can a student be expected to take the exit examination multiple times? Then, are all medical colleges across the country of the same standard? Because in absence of a same standard, you cannot ensure a level playing field. That means sealing the fate of a student once and for all through this exit test, it does not appear to be just. That is one argument of the author. The author also talks about that we have to tackle high level of centralization. What is it? Let's say, for example, more and more doctors are based out of those locations where the people have the tendency to pay. That means in the metros, in the urban areas where people have the potential to pay hefty fee, there is a high concentration and centralization of doctors. What about rural India? What about the rural areas in this country? That is something that our draft policy should tackle. This author also says that we have debased MBBS degree to such a level that today no meaningful employment opportunity is available for an MBBS graduate. And this MBBS degree has been considered only as a requirement to apply in a PG course. That means if we look at MBBS students in this country, graduates in this country, their social stature has degraded to a large extent, primarily because no meaningful employment opportunity exists for them. So unless and until you are a PG or you are a DM or you have a specialization, you are not provided good opportunity to work in top hospitals or in any hospital in this country. That means unless and until you have a PG degree or a DM degree or a specialization, no meaningful employment opportunity exists for you. And that is why we are seeing multiple PG courses have been started without any clear agenda, without any clear rationale. That is something that draft national education policy should look upon. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another important column on page number 11. Measles. Measles is basically an infection caused by virus, and it is a highly infectious disease. But Sri Lanka has become free of viral infection. That too at a time when we have seen that there is a surge of or 300% increase in the measles cases in different parts of the world, including in European countries. So how is it that Sri Lanka could become free of viral infections such as measles, and what are the lessons for India? But first, how can we declare a country as free from measles? We can declare a country as free from measles if there is no reported transmission of this virus for 3 years. And since 2016, no such case of measles infection or virus has been reported in Sri Lanka. That is why Sri Lanka has been declared as free from this viral infection. There are 2 doses required of vaccination so that we can prevent measles. Although there is no specific cure available against measles, but we can prevent it. How can we prevent it? By having 2 doses of vaccination. First, let's say when the child completes 9 months or 12 months, and then at 2 years or 3 years, for example, 2 doses of vaccination is to be prescribed. That's what we call MMR vaccine, measles, mumps and rubella. Rubella is a virus. What about other countries? Their first dose is successful. That means they cater to the majority of the children population when it comes to the first dose. But when it comes to the second dose, the percentage is less. For others, it is 67% at the second dose. That means only 67% target is met. Both these doses, the coverage in Sri Lanka has been above 95%. That means so far as Sri Lanka is concerned, their immunization program has worked to such a level that at both the dose levels, they have been in a position to target and cover the majority of their children population. This is a lesson for other countries, including European countries, that if you have to eradicate this viral infection from your societies, then you should follow the Sri Lankan model. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Let's look at the prelims based question. Number 1. The Human Capital Index is released by which of the following? It's released by the World Bank. Consider the following statements with respect to RTI. PIOs, the persons of Indian origin cardholders, they can ask for information under RTI, correct? The right to seek information from a public authority is absolute, no. The information can be denied to you if it does not serve any meaningful public purpose, if it deals with matters related to national security, so on and so forth. Political parties and Supreme Court come under the ambit of RTI. No, they don't come under the ambit of RTI. So which of the above statements are correct? A, one only. Global Innovation Index is released by INSEAD and WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization. Prelims question 2019 with reference to Swadeshi movement. Consider the following statements. It contributed to the revival of the indigenous artisan crafts and industries. Yes. The National Council of Education was established as a part of Swadeshi movement. Correct. Both the statements are correct. Census 2011 question, because we discussed population today. Meghalaya has registered highest decadal growth rate amongst all the states and union territories. No. Yes, amongst the state, it has recorded the highest decadal growth, but amongst the union territories, we have seen it is Dadra and Nagar Haveli with 55.5% decadal growth rate. A women enumerator was mascot of 2011 census, correct. Kannur district in Kerala has highest sex ratio in India amongst the district. No, this statement is wrong. So which of the above statements are incorrect? 1 and 3. Both these statements are incorrect. Mahe in Puducherry has the highest sex ratio in India. Mains based question. Parliamentary committees scrutinize legislative and executive actions and operate as consensus building platforms. They must be strengthened. Comment. Please write your answers in the comment section and we shall evaluate them. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.